Right. Good morning. Good morning. Yes, yes. Welcome to the 2026 Black History Month program by the Montgomery County employees. Give yourselves a round of applause. Yes, we are celebrating 100 years, 100 commemorations. First, I would like to thank you all for being here, but also I would like to acknowledge some of the departments for their help putting this together. First, the County Executive's Office, the Department of General Services, TEBS, our PIO, our superheroes, thank you all for coming out today, this morning. This is a wonderful occasion. We have a special program for you. I'm looking forward to hearing our speakers. Before we go any further, I'd like to bring up a great man to cover us in prayer before we get started, Bishop Paul Walker.
Thank you and good morning, everyone. Good morning. If you would, let's just rest upon our feet as we bless this event. And we are not excluding anyone's faith. So however you pray, you pray. Our Father and loving Creator, in Jesus' name, we express gratitude for the lives and examples of Black leaders who have shaped history. Their bravery illuminated paths through times of injustice. Their words inspired truth, and their efforts built connections of hope and unity. Help us to continue their mission, standing strong against wrongdoing, speaking with kindness and determination, and serving others with humility and love. Let us be guided in honoring and respecting each individual's differences. Oh God, we acknowledge that our diversity serves to unite us, fostering collaboration and understanding rather than division and discord. Let their legacy remind us that change is achievable, that upholding dignity matters, and that the pursuit of equality deserves our daily commitment. We ask for your blessing on this event and on everyone present who is dedicated to the mission of justice and equality. We pray this in the name of Jesus. Amen and amen.
Thank you, Bishop Paul Walker, very much. Right. I'd also like to acknowledge a few members from our Black History Month program planning committee. Put in a lot of work. Andrew, Lantisha, Jamal Ford, Sel in the back, always coming through for us, Derek Kinney, just to name a few. Anthony Skinner, thank you very much. Director Stowe, greatly appreciated your leadership in all of this. Teddy always comes through in the clutch. And without further ado, I'd like to bring up the fourth director of the Montgomery County Office of Human Rights and a mentor to many, Director Jim Stowe.
Good morning. Thank you so much for that very kind applause. But I think you could probably do better than that. So let me just try again. He just introduced the fourth director. All right. What a great joy it is to be here today and to be part of this program and salute Black History Month. We are so excited about the prospects, and we're optimistic. We really are. Even with all that's going on, we are still optimistic about the future because of this solid foundation we have in our history. And so as we go forward, we want to make very sure that we focus in on that I don't know about you, but I'm anxious to be really engaged in positivity. Those who are about the business of being, again, not negative, but those who are looking forward then to something much, much better. And so it's in the spirit of that that we're trying today to have this grand celebration in this program. And so I'm pleased to have join us at the actual presentation of the colors, our good friends, Lieutenant Linda Mahogany and her team. Thank y'all so much. You always come through for us. We appreciate that. And also Director Ben Stevens for his always willing support. But now the introduction of, again, the presentation of colors is by the Department of Correction Rehabilitation Honor Guard. Please come forward, Honor Guard. For the presentation of the colors, please stand.
That's it. Right shoulder. Up. Hold. On. One time. Pause. Fellas. Halt. Left. Face. Present. Fellas.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, to sing the national anthem, we have one of our co-workers, again, Willie Morales. He is the Division Chief of Administrative Services, the Administrative Services Section, Management Services Section at the Department of Correction and Rehabilitation. Come on up, Willie Morales.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Please remain standing. Ladies and gentlemen, now we'll hear then Lift Every Voice and Sing. We are pleased to have Miss Consuelo Watts. She is a graduate of the Howard University. HU? You know. And we're looking forward again to hearing her. She is graduating this year. She is a tremendous student and part of the NAACP AXO program, but now has graduated up through, again, into college. She's majoring in communication, but she really is going to be a great singer. So we're pulling for that. Again, Consuelo Watts.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring. ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of a new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won. Stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod, felt in the days when hope unborn had died, yet with a steady beat have not our weary feet come to the place for which our Father sighed. We have come over a way that with tears has been watered. We have come treading our path through the blood of the slaughtered. Out from our gloomy past, still here we stand at last, where the white gleam of our bright star is cast. God of our wearies, God of our silent tears, thou who hast brought us thus far on the way, thou who hast by thy might led us into the light, keep us forever in the path we pray, lest our feet stray from the places, our God, where we meant thee, lest our hearts, drunk with the wine of the world, we forget thee. Shadowed beneath thy hand, may we forever stand, true to our God, true to our native land. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, you may be seated. Let's thank again the Honor Guard from the Department of Correction Rehabilitation for their presentation, and also Willie Morales for his marvelous rendition of the national anthem. And I just am so proud of this young lady. Also, again, Consuela Watts. Now, she's a college student, y'all. That means that she got up this morning to come over here to be part of this program. So I think all of those deserve a round of applause. I want to also acknowledge my colleague who began our program, Frederick Hawkins, for the work he is doing in the area of the African American Advisory Group. And I want to thank him again so much for his work, and also had a wonderful, wonderful kickoff on last evening. And I want to make sure that people know that if you did not and were not there, you missed a real treat. And so again, to the committee of the African American Advisory Group and all those who planned the event last night, congratulations on a great, great event. I'm now so pleased to introduce my colleague and co-worker in the field, in the vineyard, as it were. She is in the person of Tiffany Ward. She is currently the Chief Equity Officer in Montgomery County. As Chief Equity Officer, she is charged with training county staff on the core tenets of racial equity and examining county policies and practices for their short and long-term effects on racial disparities. Longtime Washingtonian and so dedicated folks, and many might not know this, but dedicated to the youth of Washington, D.C. She's been doing that work for over 20 years. And so it's a passion of hers, and I'm just so pleased to have her as a colleague and as a friend. Please welcome Tiffany Ward. She is our Chief Equity Officer for Montgomery County.
Good morning, good morning. Yeah, glad to be here, glad to be here. I want to thank Director Stowe for consistently, no matter what the culture is outside these walls, no matter how we feel, no matter what is going on in the world, putting a beautiful program together every year to celebrate Black History Month. Also want to thank Frederick Hawkins, who has, in his short time here with OCP, just demonstrated such commitment and dedication to this community and really brought folks together, been innovative and tireless in his work to support the community. I am really pleased to be here. This is my 19th year in Montgomery County. Amazing, that time went really quickly. I have the pleasure of introducing our county executive, who really needs no introduction, but I'll be brief. But I'll tell a little bit of a story about Mark and his work. Mark Elrich is a current county executive in Montgomery County. Mark has been a lifelong public servant, spending 12 years in the council before becoming county executive here in Montgomery County. And before that, spending almost 20 years as a council member in Tacoma Park. And during that, being a teacher at Rowley in Tacoma Park. He has dedicated his life, I feel like, to fairness, to equality, and to trying to move in the right path. He's also been the co-sponsor of the bill that then became law that created the office that I now run, the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice. Mark did not have to be talked into this work. We started this work really together, and he said to me, I want to do this. Let's do this. Let's figure out a way to do it. And we did. So today I present to you your current county executive, and like I said, lifelong public servant, Mark Elrich.
Thank you. And you spent all those 19 years working for me one way or the other. And it's been a great pleasure. It was the work you did with me when I was a council member let me know that you were the right person to take this job when we created the position, and you played a role in how we figured out how to create this office. So your role was pretty significant in this. You know, I always have to bring up uncomfortable talking points. So I want to say something about the national anthem. You know we don't sing the third verse. You know why we don't sing the third verse. Francis Scott Key was a slaveholder. The way they rallied Southerners to the fight against the British was the British were going to liberate the slaves. And there were many black slaves who fled slavery and joined the Colonial Marines, which was a British military operation, because they felt they would rather fight for their freedom than passively sit by and remain slaves. So we've got this little contradiction in the song. That's why we stick to the verses to make more sense, and we avoid the verse, which is a real contradiction of values, if you have to think about where we are. But it's not unlike America. It's a place where, you declare liberty and justice for all and inalienable rights of men for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, except black men and black women, and all women, in fact. So we deal with contradictions all the time. And it's important to be cognizant of that. And it's important that the next generation understand that, lest they think they've landed in a perfect world and that it was always like this. Because if you think it's always like this, you don't understand the struggle and the work that it took to get here. And that's the dangerous thing for young people, because if you do not know your history and you assume this is just the way it's always been, you don't know the path that your parents and your grandparents and those before them had to trod in order to get to the point we are today. So I think it's important. I try to raise these little points every now and again because I think it's important that we all be aware of where we are. Montgomery County, I think, is kind of remarkable. This county in 1870 was about almost 30% black. By 1960, it had dropped to about 3.5% or 4%. Why did it drop to 3.5% and 4%? Because if you were black or Jewish, you could not buy or rent property in Montgomery County, almost anywhere. So if you think about all the black communities we celebrate now, they were confined to the farmland they originally purchased. And if you think about it, and this is true in any country that does land reform, you get your original farmstead. When you have kids, that farmstead gets divided. The kid that doesn't get a piece of land has to find another way to work. And in Montgomery County, since you couldn't live or work in Montgomery County, if you were black, it meant that a lot of families saw the kids they couldn't keep on the farm leave the county to go someplace else. And that's why the population in the county shrinks as opposed to increases all the time. In 1967, the county bans the covenants that blocked the sale or renting of land to blacks and Jews and anybody. And the black population began to grow, and today the black population is 21% of Montgomery County. So again, this is important to know your history, because everybody looks around and says, God, this must be the way it always was. Actually, this is not the way it always was. And it's not a change that took place a century ago. It's something that took place in my lifetime. I'm one of the people who moved out of the District of Columbia in 1960. I had started elementary school in 54 in DC. And in 1960, with the integration of DC schools, there was large white flight into the suburbs, and they were greeted in Montgomery County by real estate agents who said, we're still segregated. You're safe here. So those little things matter. And so I want to make sure that everybody knows, everybody who's listening knows, that we're aware of it. And when you're aware of it, you talk about it. So you normalize this discussion, because again, you don't appreciate where you are unless you know where you came from. Inside this county government, it is a remarkable place. It's far more diverse than it was 20 or 30 years ago, both diverse at the workforce level and diverse at the management level. And so when you look at the people, if I were to bring, our team of managers and leaders in the county, you would see a county that the people who work here look like the people who live here. And that's been increasingly true. And, I'm a part of it. County Executive Ike Leggett was probably the first person who made the most serious effort to move in that direction. And he kind of normalized, this is what we're going to do. And, we've continued that. And, everybody builds on the people who precede them. You either build on it or you tear it down and start over. I had the fortune of being able to build on what was set up in Montgomery County and to move things forward. So I'm appreciative of that. Black History Month exists because people had to fight to be recognized as full contributors to society. That was not a given. Even today, and it is heartbreaking to listen to the lunatic who was president say that if a woman or a black person occupies a position of authority or responsibility, that they're only there because of DEI. That it is impossible to view them as earning and deserving the positions they're in, which just, the underlying racism in that thought is mind-boggling. And the fact that more people in this country don't rebel and don't speak out against it is also mind-boggling to me, because why anybody would stand for being told if you're here as you're a manager, that you don't deserve to be a manager. I tell people, look at this county government. Everybody has a place here. Everybody does their work here. And the people who work here do their jobs as well as any white person would do the job. There is no difference in the ability of people to do the work and to be successful. And that's the message we need to get out more. And we got to be willing to openly talk about the overt racism, not the subtle racism of this president, but the overt racism of him and his cohort, Steve Miller, who is also probably one of the most evil people in this country, because their spreading of hate and utter disrespect for human beings is un-American. It should be un-American. It was probably very well within America's old tradition, but it was inconsistent with American values. So we deal with that. We've told people that we're not walking back anything that we do that you might call diversity, equity, and inclusion. Nothing will change here. No federal policy will bring us back to a different place. We're going to continue to make sure that everybody has the opportunities they deserve, that our kids have the opportunity to go to school, to grow up, get educated, and take their place in society like everybody else has been able to do. Institutions like the Sandy Springs Slave Museum, Lincoln Park Historical Society, Button Farm, Laytonsville, and Damascus communities help ensure that Black history in this county is told accurately. One of the projects I'm working on now, I hope I can make some serious progress on, is looking at the Red Brick Courthouse as a potential site of a Black History Museum. I think at this time, and this is something we can do, we're talking with people who might be able to enable us to do it. We're working with leaders in the Black community. This would be a community project, not a county government project, not led by me. My role in this is to facilitate putting people together and saying, do you want to do this? And I believe people want to do it. So we have the opportunity. We're going to try to make a move in that direction. I think it would be important in a real statement in this time of trying to erase Black history to actually build a monument to Black history in Montgomery County, to say that we're not part of that. And I can't think of a better way to say we're not part of that than to build a museum that lets you tell the story of the real Montgomery County. I mean, I always tell people, you would not realize that this place was pretty much all plantations. You don't have any sense of that. As you walk around here or look around here, you would have no clue of how pervasive that institution was in this county. And so I think we've got the opportunity to do a better job and to think memorials like the Josiah Henson Museum, which if you haven't been there, you should go there. It's astounding, and the technology that they brought in that museum has really inspired me, because it's more than just a static, let's look at this thing behind a box or, this poster on a wall, but it is living. And that, I think, is a really important thing, and I'm looking forward to seeing where else we can incorporate that kind of storytelling. We do programming through the African American, African, and Caribbean advisory groups that brings culture and history to life. And we have our Juneteenth celebrations, and our Juneteenth celebrations have gone from small, very inconsequential, to really big. And that's only happened in the last few years. I mean, the first Juneteenth celebration I went to, it was not very many people. The celebrations now are much bigger, and we've really elevated it. And I think that's one of the great things that's happened here. And it came out of the community largely. People said, we want this to be a more significant event. We have the African American Living Legends Awards and today's Employee Black History Month program, reflects that intentional commitment. And I want to recognize the Racial Equity and Social Justice Commission. I want to thank our Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice staff, and I want to thank the Office of Human Rights and the Human Rights Commission. All of you helped make it possible for Montgomery County to be the better place that it has become. And we honor and celebrate the contributions of our Black residents, past and present, and we stand in solidarity with those who shaped this community and this county. And I had the pleasure, because I've been involved in social issues in this county for a long time. So I remember Roscoe Nix not as a legend, but as a worker, as a person you went to talk to, as a person who moved the community and spoke for the community. And if you had a meeting with Roscoe, you understood that he was serious. There was an expectation that the government would respond. And it was kind of cool to think of him and some of the other leaders back then who had that kind of weight and were able to drive things forward in the county. And without people like him in the last 30 years, this county would be a different place. But their courage and willingness to stand up really, I think, helped shape us the way we are today. So I want to thank everybody who's here today. I want to thank all the employees who are watching this from their desks. And I hope there are a lot of you watching this from your desks, because if you're not down here, I'm going to assume you're watching this from your desk. But everybody should take part in this, and I hope there are a lot of folks who are taking a moment out from their work to actually celebrate what we're building here in Montgomery County and what we're going to continue to build in the county. So thank you all very much, and I'll stay for a little bit, and then I'm going back to work again. Thank you.
Thank you so much again, Mr. County Executive. Again, thank you, my colleague, Tiffany Ward. We want to also just acknowledge that the County Council President, Natalie Fane Gonzalez, had a conflict. She was going to try to get by, so if she does get by, we certainly want to acknowledge her, as I do want to also mention a number of council members who wanted to also be here today. But again, this is also committee meeting day for County Council. And as you may know, with the snow and so forth, a lot has been doubled up, even more so than it maybe would have been otherwise. So I do want to acknowledge that all of them did respond and wanted to be here and be a part of this. So let me just, again, just say thank our County Council for working the way they do. Let's do that. Now let me move forward. We're going to make a little adjustment in the program and go now to our panel before you. I am so pleased to have these individuals with us, and they have just not only given their time this morning, but also with the work they do on a daily basis. It is so important that we do this. And I am being also prompted that I missed something here, so let me go back. And folks, go back. Let's just fix this right now, because we don't want to miss this person who is following our county executive. Scholar, community organizer, corporate executive, military standout, and the first Black governor of the state of Maryland, again, Wes Moore. Let's hear from Wes Moore.
At a time when our society seems to be still trying to recover from this measure of vitriol and misunderstanding, this assemblage reminds us of what's right. Today, it's Ms. Tubman that brought us together. Despite the unevenness of our past, Maryland bears the standard for what national unity could and should look like in the United States of America. Our sense of common cause was not preordained. It was earned by many courageous acts that have taken place over generations. And as long as that moral arc is moving, we've always been blessed to have people who are willing to make sure that it bent in the right direction. And that includes people like General Tubman. Because General Tubman continues to mark our path towards greater connectivity and community, and compassion and love. She continues to be our North Star towards justice. She continues to do as was said in Psalm 61 to help us to find a rock that is higher than I. And today, we honor that legacy with an honor that puts on paper what we've always known in our hearts, that our leader in acts deserved a star on her shoulder the whole time. That time when
Thank you so much. This is beyond the obvious content of that. The significance of that was also that if you've heard the governor speak on a number of occasions, he always talks about the fact that when he is really pressed on all things he has to do before him, he imagines having a conversation with Harriet Tubman. And he said, begin then to share with Harriet Tubman all the things they had to deal with. Recent bridge construction there in downtown Baltimore. You know, all kinds of issues with employment and so forth and so on. He went through this whole litany of things that were going on in the state of Maryland and then remembered who he was talking to. This just barely a little 4 feet tall general. By the way, she was a DEI hire. In and out of danger some 39 different times, freeing almost 300 people. And so the governor said, I then began to look at my challenges, and they just didn't seem that big anymore. And so again, we do recognize one of our own, General Harriet Tubman. And now, my friends, we're going to go then to our panel discussion. As I mentioned early on, I'm pleased to have these persons join us because they in their own right have done some marvelous things. And I think it's important for you to know who they are. So bear with me as I read their bios so you know who, in fact, will be presented before you very shortly. The first person is my home girl. What that means, by the way, is that she's from my home area. Sometimes we say things and people don't always understand what we're saying. She is my home girl from North Carolina. At any rate, Ms. Cheryl Spicer, Cultural Resource Museum Supervisor, Cultural Resources Museum Section, Park and Planning, Stewart Division of the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission, Department of Parks, Montgomery County. Cheryl has been with the commission for over 17 years and serves as supervisor for the interpretive programming staff for parks, historic sites, and museums, the Oakley Cabin African American Museum and Park, the Kinsley Schoolhouse, Buzzard Farmstead at the Agricultural History Farm Park, the Underground Railroad Experience Trail, and Woodland Museum at Woodland Manor Cultural Park, Josiah Henson Museum and Park, and the Thomas Hopper Cabin at Brookside Nature Center. In addition to administering these sites, she has oversight of ongoing and future museum projects within the park and on park land. A native of North Carolina, as I mentioned, she has nearly 30 years of experience working within the museum profession. Her career began in museum education at Greensboro Historical Museum in Greensboro, North Carolina, and then continued at the Mariners Museum in Newport News, Virginia, and the former Abbey Aldridge Rockefeller Folk Arts Center at Colonial Williamsburg in Virginia. Prior to joining Montgomery Park, she served 10 years with the North Carolina Museum of History as the education director and registrar of the museum and of the Albemarle, the Museum of History Northeastern Regional Branch, and lastly, as curator of our community history. She is actively involved in the national arena of museum professional organizations, having served on the boards of Board of American Association of State and Local History, and the Association of African American Museums, where she remains a lifelong member. She is a proud graduate of the University of North Carolina at Greensboro with a Bachelor of Art in History, and Hampton University in Hampton, Virginia, with the Masters of Museum Studies. Ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Cheryl Spicer. Our next panelist is Renault Smith, who is a devoted educator, community leader, and passionate advocate for teaching African American history across Maryland and the broader region. With over 3 decades of experience teaching advanced placement of U.S. history and African American history in the D.C. public school system. Okay. All right. You've changed, Dr. Smith. Let me go back and see who that is over there. Let's redo this again. Tracy Oliver Gary. Tracy Oliver Gary represents the Montgomery County Public Schools on Montgomery County Commission for Remembrance and Reconciliation, a body that helps the community confront its lynching history and other difficult aspects of local African American history. She leads the Montgomery County Public Schools system-wide Remembrance and Reconciliation Month each November, which includes mandated lessons on historic African American history for all students and change-maker workshops that empower students to become social justice advocates. Tracy is a passionate and dedicated educator who has spent more than 20 years serving students and families in Georgia, Maryland, Georgia and Maryland. Since 2021, she has led as the pre-K-12 social studies supervisor for Montgomery County Public Schools, where she champions inclusive and culturally responsive teaching practices. In 2011, Tracy was honored with the Teaching Tolerance Award for Excellence in Culturally Responsive Teaching by the Southern Poverty Law Center in Montgomery, Alabama, recognizing her commitment to equity and her ability to inspire students from diverse backgrounds, believing that visible matters for every child. Visibility matters for every child. Tracy works tirelessly to address educational challenges that leave students feeling unheard, unseen, or disrespected. Her leadership reflects a deep commitment to creating classrooms where every student feels valued and equipped to thrive. She is also from Little Rock, Arkansas. Please, again, let's acknowledge Tracy Oliver Gary. Now I'm going to acknowledge Dr. Smith. And I thank him again for his graciousness this morning. I apologize then for that error. As I mentioned, Renault Smith is a devoted educator, community leader, and passionate advocate for teaching African American history across Maryland and the broader region. Across America as well. I should put that in there too. With over 3 decades of experience teaching advanced placement of U.S. history and African American history in the D.C. public school system, he has consistently inspired students to engage deeply with civic education and social justice. In 2007, Renault was honored with the prestigious McGraw-Hill Prize in Education, selected from hundreds of nominees nationwide for his outstanding contributions to global education, including his role in education initiatives grounded in global and cultural awareness. He has also been recognized as the Global Educator of the Year by McGraw-Hill, a testament to his innovative teaching practices and commitment to fostering cross-cultural understanding. After retiring from Washington, D.C. public schools, Renault continues to enrich young minds as a board member at the Sandy Spring Slade Museum and African Art Gallery, where he leads programs, development, and outreach to schools and community groups. He's a seasoned keynote speaker. He shares powerful narratives such as during and around Montgomery County's Juneteenth observances, linking personal family history to a broader African American experience. With a deep, deep belief in the transformative power of education, Dr. Smith brings warmth, wisdom, and cultural insight to every classroom presentation and community engagement, showcasing why he has been recognized as a leading global educator. Dr. Smith. Please come up and join us. Amen. Amen. Next, my friends, is a colleague, and I'm just so proud of this young man and all he's done here in this community. And he's got the dynamic duo behind him. His parents are here today, Brother Gerald and Brother Rita Green. I always want to recognize them as again, the folks who are behind the product that, in fact, you brought into this world. And so Mr. Jason Green is who I'm speaking of. He's a Maryland-born community organizer turned attorney, a tech entrepreneur, he's a public speaker, and more recently, a film director. He previously served as special assistant to the president and associate White House counsel to President Obama, providing legal counsel on economic and domestic policy matters. Jason is the co-founder of SkillSmart, a pioneering economic impact measurement company, and currently serves as CEO of Evergreen Labs, an innovative incubator advancing strategies for long-term community and economic growth. He is also a non-resident fellow at the Urban Institute Research to Action Lab. Beyond his entrepreneurial work, Jason serves as a trustee for the Pleasant View Historic Association, supporting its fundraising campaign to preserve the Pleasant View Historic Site. He is a founding member, as it turns out, and also a founding commissioner and chair of the Montgomery County Commission on Remembrance and Reconciliation. And let me just add to that, he has just done a marvelous job in his role as the chair of that particular commission. His award-winning documentary, Finding Fellowship, is available on PBS and explores the rich history of Quince Orchard and the power of community. Jason is also the author of Too Precious to Lose, a memoir of family, community, and possibility, which chronicles his journey from rural Maryland roots to serving in the Obama White House, weaving together powerful themes of community, family history, and purpose. Ladies and gentlemen, Jason Green. So to each of our panelists, I think all of you have a mic with you as well. First question, from your various fields of work and endeavor, when you think about the issue of Black history, what might be the first thing that comes to mind for you? Let me add a little twist to that you are passionate around. First thing comes to mind that you are passionate around. We'll start there, Ms. Cheryl Spicer.
Okay. Thank you for the invitation to participate. The first thing that comes to mind is hands-on history. How do we recreate an experience where people learn about what it meant to survive 1870 as a Black woman, as a Black man, as a Black child in any state, particularly Maryland or North Carolina? How do we bring that to life and encompass with that both history, but a sense of struggle, but a sense of joy, especially as we're talking about children who just need to be innocent and so forth. So I always think about, with Black history, the retention of history in our hands and what we do, all that is within our, and by our, I mean those of African descent, everything that is encapsulated in our blood, in what we do, in our memory, and our habits, and the things that we pass on from our parents, our grandparents, and so forth. And it is taking all of that history in us and then translating that to a public so that you can experience what it's like to make biscuits by hand, to cook over an open stove, and understand why it's so dangerous for women with long skirts and so forth to cook over an open stove and so forth. All of these small things. That's the first thing that comes to mind, is how do I help you embrace history by hands, using your hands.
Thank you very much. So Tracy, from education, you've been in now over 30 years. I mean, so what's the thing? Well, I'm gonna give you 10. I'm gonna give you 10 years just because you know who you are. So here's the deal. So how do you see yourself in this area as well? What are the things that, again, that you can grasp and say that you're passionate around as well? Your first thing to come to mind.
So also thank you for having me. Through the work of the Commission on Remembrance and Reconciliation, our charge, to me, is to remember and to figure out what reconciliation means. So as a leader of social studies in Montgomery County, my passion is around learning local African American history. Why does Montgomery County exist in the way that it does? What are the things that have been pushed aside intentionally? What are the stories that people don't want you to know? Why does what we live in exist today? And so an example of that is as we are learning, for those who don't know, we do K-12 mandatory 5 lessons throughout the month of November for Remembrance and Reconciliation Month on local African American history. In order to understand that history, we have to do interviews with community members because much of it is not written. And so one of the things that, as we have been learning about the history, and this is where I have my passion, or when you ask me about passion, I've been asking myself, okay, if Montgomery County had up to 30% Black population, and then we find out that there were all of these, Amoko Lamb right now is doing a project, and they've identified about 140 kinship communities. And that goes from neighborhoods to actual full communities that had churches, that had mutual aid societies, things like that. What happened to the land? What happened? What's the story behind all of that? And so one of the things that we have been unearthing is the impact of urban renewal on those Black communities. And so my passion right now is to tell that story. And we're learning it. And I'll pass the mic in 1 second, but just indulge me. Some of the things that we're learning, we have a community member, Harvey Matthews, who talks about how the KKK drug his father out of his home twice, beat him up, deposited him back on his yard, and intimidated him into selling his land, or giving over his land. They were refusing to sell. That family had to flee. That's why they left Montgomery County. We have Delegate Greg Wims, who grew up in Stewarttown, and his family owned an acre of land. Everybody in his neighborhood owned an acre of land. The county was trying to force him off the land. They refused to sell. The county refused to give Black families in the 1960s running water, electricity, paved roads. So that meant that they had to burn their trash because there's no sanitation coming. And it was easy to condemn the homes. And in fact, there is a government document that outlines and shows where the areas that the county planned on condemning, because you had a need for people to move in from the federal government, right? Because it's the time of expansion of the federal government. And the places that they were going to condemn were Black communities. Coupled with redlining, so let me finish Greg Wims' story. They burned his home. The county condemned his home, and then they burned it to force them out. So when we're talking about what happened to the Black population, it wasn't just simply redlining. After many families were forced to move, they could not find a place to live in Montgomery County because of redlining. But the county had an intentional purpose in taking the land and getting the land. So I am passionate about telling those stories so that we can understand why the landscape is as it is, why you don't see a lot of dilapidated homes and things like that, as though if you were to drive in other places, because Montgomery County had a plan to take over those homes and rebuild and kick Black families off the land. And that's a story I am very passionate about telling.
Thank you. Dr. Smith, your perspective.
Well, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, first of all, let me say this. I'm about to turn 78 years old. Why'd you say that? Oh, okay, all right, well, I'll accept that. I said, oh. Now what that meant, the reason I said that, I am surprised still, as a former history teacher, where something called primary source is very, very important. I'm finally beginning to realize, believe it or not, after all these years, how fortunate I have been to be in the right place at the right time. I went to school at Tuskegee. That was in the 1960s. That was when George Wallace was the governor. That was when SCLC and Dr. King were marching. got a chance to meet with Dr. King, got a chance to talk with Dr. King. And when you're living in the moment, and especially you're a teenager, you don't understand the significance of the experience that you've had. John Lewis was the person that got me to join SNCC. He came to Tuskegee. Stokely Carmichael, Rap Brown, Angela Davis. Tuskegee was the home base for the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And I got involved. And if you had known me prior to this, that's not my personality. I was not the one that was going to be in front of the march. I was going to be somewhere behind, but I was going to be working. I saw all these things. I saw bodies that had been lynched. I saw bodies that had been burned. I did voter registration for people in Macon County and Lowndes County. In case you don't know about Lowndes County, that's a county that adjoins Macon, where Tuskegee is. It's about 90% black, and they had no black elected officials when I was school, not one. Lowndes County was the county where the Black Panther organization was first conceived. A lot of people think Oakland, California. But if you go back and do the research, the history of the name Black Panthers came from Lowndes County, Alabama. There were so many black people that were not literate, and they were getting ready to run a slate of people to run against the white party. The white party's mascot was a rooster. And for those white people who were illiterate, the white party said, everybody knows what a rooster is, so just vote for the slate that has the rooster in front of it. Whereas SNCC said, well, we can do the same thing. We have a lot of black people that are uneducated and so forth, but they want to vote pro-black. So they chose a Black Panther to be the, what's the word I'm looking for? Yes, be the mascot, to be the back of the symbol. That's where the origin of the Black Panther Party began. So I'm there. I'm watching this, I'm seeing this, and even after I graduated from college, I finished in 1970, I still didn't understand the significance. You know when it really hit me? When I came to speak for Juneteenth at the second or third Juneteenth, and you sponsored.
Yes.
It really hit me, all those years, folks. It just hit me. I said, my God, I've been fortunate. So when I go speak to students, the one thing I enjoy doing is, when you tell these stories, there are always students that say, Ms. Smith, that's a wonderful story. I kind of find that difficult to believe. Where did you go to research that? I said, I didn't research it, I was there. And that becomes the passion I have in teaching students. And when they hear an authentic story from an authentic person, they really listen and pay attention. And so that's what my goal is at the Sandy Springs Slave Museum.
Thank you very much. Jason Green.
Two words come to mind that I'm passionate about, and they connect to one another. One is story, and the other is power. And I think that they're connected, deeply connected. When I heard the rest of the panel talk, even when you were just conveying the great fortune that you've had in being in the right place at the right time, what I'm starting to realize through the work on the Commission on Remembrance and Reconciliation that Tracy sits on with me, that I should acknowledge Bishop Walker was one of our founding commissioners and deeply appreciate his service. Cheryl, we're recruiting you to come on too. What I've realized is that these concepts of history, right, as a proud product of Montgomery County Public Schools, I was always taught Black history happened in places long ago and far away. You know, schools were integrated in Little Rock, Arkansas. Right? Slavery existed in Montgomery, Alabama, not Montgomery County, Maryland. And so when you can start to personalize that history through story, like Dr. Smith is talking about, like I've been able to do sitting with my grandmother and others in the Quince Orchard community. Well, then you start to, that connects to this power piece, I think is critically important. And what we've realized with the commission is that this history also isn't history. Not only did it happen far away, not only did it happen, not happen far away, and not happen a long time ago, just slavery, if we want to talk about enslavement, right? That happened here in this county. I can say, we've looked in the records, my grandfather's grandfather was enslaved about a mile from where we sit right now. So that didn't happen a long time ago. My grandfather's grandfather, we can touch that. It certainly didn't happen far away geographically. But even the context of what that means, we're still writing. That history isn't finished being written yet, and we have a role and responsibility to write that history. Part of the charge of the commission is to document this period post-emancipation, Reconstruction era lynchings. Racial terror lynchings took place in this county, 3 of which we know and are documented, but perhaps more, between 1880 and 1896. Well, even the way in which the history books have articulated the narrative around those 3 men, around their lynching and their murder, we've realized is inaccurate. And so the commission's charge is to go back and tell a fuller, more accurate story. And in so doing, you see threads. You see the connection points to the way in which there's complicity of different organizations around Mr. George Floyd's murder and the character assassination that took place for him, or Mr. Trayvon Martin, or Ms. Renee Good. You start to see the connections about how this history, understanding it, articulating it more clearly, drawing conclusions from it actually gives us power. And it gives us perspective to really address where we are today. Right? So I think that's what's so compelling about the first person story accounts that we're hearing from Dr. Smith. It gives us authority. It gives us context and perspective to then actually address where we're going today. I often talk about my time. You mentioned in the bio that I served for 4 years as Associate White House Counsel. And I like to say that I was running around the White House trying to get people to listen to me, and I didn't have much to say. After I left the administration, I spent 10 years documenting my grandmother's story, the story of Quince Orchard, my father's story, and that gave me the foundation and the understanding and the authority for everything else that I was trying to articulate in those moments. Does that make sense? Like that story gives you a grounding and authority to be present as we're trying to push these issues forward.
Thank you so much for all of the panelists. Did you have something to add, Tom? Please, Cheryl.
I did. I wanted to, after listening to the panelists, I think that there's a thread that connects here through museums. A part of my passion with living history and so forth has always been through museums since college and so forth. But here in Montgomery County, what is really important as I listen to my panelists and the work that I know that the commission is doing and the work that Dr. Smith is doing and the stories that they share is the place that local people can come to learn about these stories and providing a place that is a safe conversation space. I think in point of one of our newer museums that opened within Montgomery Parks, and the county executive spoke of it, and that's the Josiah Henson Museum and Park. A little known story, a tiny house in the midst of a very affluent community with a history that had been hidden for nearly 100 years. And it is within this space that is now turned into an international museum. And it's an international museum because Henson is an international figure. Born in Charles County, reared in Montgomery County, but whose story then leaves Montgomery County, Maryland, and travels all the way to Ontario, Canada. in Dresden, Canada, where his story ends. But it is creating a space now within that museum so that this commission that focuses on current living history that's happening right now. How do you represent those lives that were lost to violence and racial violence and terror and so forth? How do we counter what is happening right now in our country? Where can you come and have those conversations through public programs? That's museums. So when I think of the role that museums play in ensuring that your work with students has a space to be exhibited, a space where you can come and work, a space that contains primary sources, where we have not only exhibits of artifacts, but we have photographs. We have opportunities through programming where you come and you meet living primary sources such as Dr. Smith, the stories, the current recent stories that Jason's worked on and the documentaries that are told. That and you hit me with that first question is passion. I was like, first thing I'm thinking is the program I got coming up and I get to be hands-on, but it's in Black museums. It's why I've been a part of the Association of Black Museums, of African American Museums, for my entire career, because it is an organization, a national organization that few people know about, that represents hundreds of Black history museums and art museums and cultural centers across the country. And without such an organization providing support and providing awareness and lifting these sites into a public realm, you don't know about these local histories. They don't know where they can come and get support. And so having Josiah Henson Museum and Park, having Oakley Cabin African American Museum in Olney, and the Woodlawn Manor Museum in Sandy Spring, having these places that you have a space to come and learn, but a space to also have a safe conversation where we're going to bring in facilitated speakers, such as panelists. I've already signed you all up. You don't even know yet. You're coming back. I signed them up already, and you come often, your family. But it is creating these spaces for people to learn. Right now, what's happening in our country when we have, I can't even begin to touch on what the county executive said, but he said it so eloquently in representing where we are in this current mindset of the administration, that we must mask history and we must mask and remove these things because they make people feel some kind of way. You ought to feel some kind of way. You ought to, every single living body in this country should feel some kind of way about our American history. It is Black, it is Indigenous, it is Latino, it is Hispanic, it is Caribbean, it is everything that has made this country. We're a country of immigrants. Don't get me going on the whole stolen land thing. That's a different subject. That's saved for Banned Book Week. But it is knowing that your museums represent you. And let me just say that your Montgomery County Parks museums represent this history. We are not affected by the federal DEI. We don't, we're always DEI. My mic cut off. Ooh, is that a message? Okay, I'm gonna be brief, but just to reiterate the fact that your history is retained. We are telling the truth. We're basing it in fact. We're not masking anything. We're not removing any information. We're not going to dumb anything down. We're not going to soften the story. We're going to present the facts as they are. We're going to continue to do it. We have been doing it, and we will continue to do it. So.
Thank you very much. We want to now just make sure that our virtual audience know out there, if you have a question you might want to again pose to the panel, if you just do so by putting it into the Q&A. We're more than glad to have that question be addressed by the panel. And anybody sitting out here in our audience today that might have a question, please let me know, raise your hand, we'll get to you, and we'll ask the panel that question, and they'll respond to it accordingly. So again, you touched on something, that's where I'm going next, and that is this idea that a lot of people say this is history. So why now? Why continually bring up these things? And of course, you end up sort of making our children feel bad about themselves. So what's the issue here? Why is that important? And is there any real credence given to the person that says that was then and now is now? Anybody, jump in.
Yeah, I'd like to, again, everything I talk about is going to be from a personal context, and I amaze myself sometimes because I've forgotten more about what I've done than I remember. I was 10 years old. I'm originally from Dallas, Texas. So I grew up with Juneteenth. And the Juneteenth I grew up is not the Juneteenth you all know about. When you go and you hear about the history and that sort of thing, my interpretation of Juneteenth and what I witnessed is totally different. But that's another story, because you're going to invite me out to speak, right? When I used to go down to a place called Comanche Crossing, a village of black people, south of Dallas, about 75 miles. That's where we did Juneteenth. We didn't even call it Juneteenth. I didn't even know Juneteenth existed as Juneteenth until I was an adult. We called it homecoming. My father would take me down there, and we have a 220-acre farm that started in the 1800s and it stayed in the family to today. I used to go down there and run around that farm all by myself at around 10 years old. Then Dad would say, come on, we're going to visit cousin. Oh, no. I hated it, going to sit on the floor, mostly women, and hear them talk. Now, as I reflect, oh boy, I'm so glad. How long ago was long ago? I started doing the math. I never thought about math. I'm born in 1948. I'm sitting on the floor listening to women who were 95 and 100 years old talk about what their parents who were slaves taught them and about Juneteenth. And only in my adulthood did I do the math. I'm talking to the people who were born into slavery. I'm sitting there talking to slaves, former slaves. They may have been very young at that time. It was the tail end of slavery, but they were telling me primary source stories from their parents as young slaves. So when we talk about history, 100 years in history is yesterday. We have to go into millions of years, hundreds of million years. Even when we talk about the advent of men walking straight up, that was just last year. So when people talk about that, I usually bring that example up of how I talk to a slave. And people say, what? But then when you sit down and think about it, there are a lot of people who can tell that story. It just all depends on what age you were. All right, so it was just yesterday. So that's how I respond to that.
Anybody else, real quick?
I think people also only get bits and pieces of history. People say that's history, that's now. I mean, people don't have a full context of history and story, and I'm not sort of casting aspersions on others. I'll say I'm a victim of that too. I grew up in the community of Quince Orchard, descendant community. We have still 3 acres of land, has the church on it, has the schoolhouse. Every year we had the Mayfest program or the Junefest program where similarly elders would gather, tell the stories, and I was much more interested in playing in the field and kicking a soccer ball outside than hearing the story. But it was there. I grew up in it, but I didn't fully appreciate it, right? And so when I told the story of Fairhaven, part of the documentary in the book is the merger of these 3 churches in Quince Orchard, 1 black, 2 white. They merged after Dr. King's assassination. And everyone said, oh, well, that can happen in Montgomery County because you didn't have any racial problems there. You didn't have slavery in Montgomery County. You didn't have segregation in Montgomery County. Like Montgomery County is just utopian, affluent. Yeah, that makes sense. And so you have to give that context because you miss it. And so it was really important to put that church merger in the context of a community that experienced slavery, that experienced racial terror, that experienced state-sanctioned segregation, right? And a community that still decided, not because of the absence of those things, but because of their presence, they still decided to go in a different direction, but you have to contextualize it. And so when we say, oh, that was in the past, like all of that matters for the way in which we see these events and the way in which we move forward in the future. That's how I see it.
Anybody else, real quick?
I'll go quickly. I believe that understanding history, learning history is very dangerous. The reason that it is dangerous is because you now are held accountable for what you do with that knowledge.
Wow.
Okay, so for me, as an educator, for students to understand history, especially African American history and especially local history, which, by the way, is an extreme treasure. Very few schools in the United States teach local history. Okay, so to understand local African American history then charges students to say, okay, I can't believe that happened, and how do I prevent it from happening again? How can I tell others? And that is why we have experienced a backlash. I believe that one of the, and this is being facetious, gifts of COVID was many parents' very first time learning about what their kids were learning. And it was a very different narrative that was told to them. And it challenged the status quo. And that was dangerous for them. And that, to me, is part of the reason why, a big part of the reason why we see a backlash against the teaching of African American history. Because now my child will not grow up to perpetuate the hate that I've tried to pass on. It's very dangerous. So I think that learning history liberates the mind. It then empowers people to say, I am going to push for change. And that is why some people try to control it. It's who gets to control the narrative. And when we have an inclusive curriculum, an inclusive history curriculum, then that then diminishes the one narrative that people want to push.
One thing to that. Might sound a little cynical. If you think that public schools are going to teach cultural history, then you're out of your mind.
It depends. In Montgomery County Public Schools, we do.
Well,
I just want to correct you.
No, I taught in Montgomery County Public Schools.
I'm saying correct now.
Listen to what I'm saying. Listen to what I'm saying. Generally speaking, yes. Like there are about, three or four high schools that teach African American history, AP?
I believe we have around 12 or 13 right now.
12 or 13.
And it's growing. And then we also teach African American history as an elective outside of the AP African American Studies.
Okay. They come to the museum, our museum. And again, we go back to my point. If you think that because you have a course, I'm sorry, I'm not criticizing. This is just something we have to think about. If you have a course and a room and a teacher, that does not mean that you necessarily have the history. Not necessarily. All right? That's why we go back to Cheryl and we talk about museums. Where museums like the Sandy Springs Slave Museum, where I work, and the other museums, they're the fallback. They're more important now than ever before. Because there are some teachers in the county who teach these classes and say, you know, I'm not that knowledgeable. I know a lot, but I'm not that knowledgeable. And they know it, and they realize it, and they call us. And they say, we'd like to come out and you do a presentation on A, B, C, D. So we start this collaborative work between the public schools and the museums. So to sit back and to complain and say, well, they didn't teach him that in high school and school he goes to, we should be teaching it ourselves.
It was an interesting point. This is, by the way, is the 100th year of the celebration observance of Black History Month, and also the September 6th, I think I heard the county executive say, for Montgomery County, 250th anniversary. And so with that long history that is out there before us as we begin to celebrate and lift up the 250th year anniversary throughout this year, there is still this inertia. I want to dig a little deeper here. This inertia not only behind those who may not be necessarily Black folks, but also folks in general who still are pushing back on, just don't want to hear this. And so I need to understand from you now, again, I'm pushing a little hard on this question because, again, most people sort of, attributed this sort of lack of understanding or lack of wanting to know about to the majority community. But there's some folks who never talked about in my upbringing, never talked about these kinds of issues and concerns that they in fact went through, the experiences that they had. Didn't want to share that with us. I don't know if it was for protecting us. I'm not so sure exactly what it was. Does anybody happen to know or give some thought about what that was all about? And does that still yet exist today? Anybody, please jump in.
Since you talked to your grandmother first. Okay.
Reverend Stowe, one of the things that comes to mind hearing you ask that question is sitting with my grandmother, and it's kind of remarkable to hear the milestones. 100 years of Black history, 250 years in Montgomery County. My grandmother passed at 106. So she lived all of those 100 years of Black history and added a couple, more than half a decade plus. And I got to sit with her and talk about this. And this goes back to story. It goes back to the importance of story and how it sort of completes history. I asked her directly that question. She was born in 1918. So her grandparents and her grandparents, who she was very close to, I asked about our history of slavery. And she was one of the ones that said, I don't think slavery existed in Montgomery County. It was something that was not talked about. And when I asked why, she said, I think it was too difficult to talk about. They didn't want to pass that to us. They didn't want us to sort of carry the ills and the perspectives of that story. And I recognize that. The problem with that is she created her own narrative, right? She filled the space. So not knowing the story, it's not that it was blank, it was completed. So she created a narrative of slavery not existing in Montgomery County to fill the absence of the truth of what happened to her family and descendants and ancestors. And that gets passed on. And so we need to have these conversations, though they are difficult, though they may feel some kind of way. I think Tracy's exactly right. Everyone, or forgive me, maybe it was Cheryl that said this, everyone should feel some kind of way about this history, and that should not be a barrier to it. And one last comment before I pass the mic. Part of our charge with the Commission on Remembrance and Reconciliation was to engage communities around this history and to start this process towards reconciliation. One of the things that we would hear when we would talk about erecting markers to these three men, to having these conversations, was that was who we were then, it's not who we are now. Suggesting that we need not have this conversation and we need not put up a marker proclaiming, any sort of commemoration for them. And my comment back to them was, one, these acts of terror were acts of community, and so they require an equal reaction of community. But I also, if indeed that's not who we are, then we should feel very comfortable speaking in one loud voice to proclaim who we are, what we stand for, and what we'll allow in our communities. And I feel like that's the other part of this, right? It's like people want to say that that's what happened then, that's not who we are. Well, great. Let's acknowledge that, and then let's speak very profoundly and clearly and directly about who we are today.
Panel, we've got some questions that have come from our audience who are out there viewing us today. Andrew, are you going to help me with those questions?
Yes, I am, Jim. First question is, what is being done about the Black Cemetery on Piney Meeting House Road? This person says they've driven by it several weeks ago, and they've seen that it's been cleaned up and possibly some graves out there that have been cleaned. Is there anything more going to be done with that? It's an interesting story, and the corner of the farm that was sold back in the Reconstruction period to be used for Black folk burials.
Thank you, Andrew. Anybody qualified to answer that question? We've got somebody in the audience who can maybe deal with that as well. All right. We don't have an answer for that particular question, but we will try our very best to get an answer.
Okay.
Let us know who that. I'm so sorry, please.
I can refer him to someone. If you contact Sandy Williams at the Sandy Springs Slave Museum.
Thank you.
She is very knowledgeable about what's going on historically and what's going on currently with the graveyard. I personally just cannot. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you. Any additional questions, Andrew?
Yes, the next question. As a previous homeschool parent and aunt of a niece who's currently homeschooled, do any of the panelists have books that are available to be used in a homeschool teaching environment for Black history education?
What grade?
They did not mention the grade.
Okay. Again, the Sandy Springs Slave Museum has books available for students. And we have recently been purchasing books and literally giving them away to students who come and visit the museum. So again, you might want to contact the Sandy Springs Slave Museum and come by and speak with some of the docents there, and they can address that question specifically.
Okay, we've got two more questions.
I wanted to.
Hold on,
I
we've got
answer
another
that
answer
question.
for you, Andrew.
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, so what I'm going to talk about is they're not books. However, for the 4 years that we have done Remembrance and Reconciliation Month lessons, all 4 years, all of the lessons are on our website for Montgomery. So all you have to go to is the Montgomery County Public Schools website, and in the search engine, just type in social studies. On our home page, make sure you're on the home page, not middle, high, or elementary, but the social studies homepage. If you scroll down, you will see the links to all the lessons for the last 4 years. And we have them in multiple grade bands. We have them for lower elementary, upper elementary, and secondary. And depending on the year and the content, you may have secondary split from middle and high school. So I encourage you to go to our social studies website on Montgomery County Public Schools. And go to our webpage on Montgomery County Public Schools website, and you will see all 4 years of lessons. We did that not only to be totally transparent about what we're teaching, but also as a gift to the community so that all community members can learn about local African American history.
And it's such a treat and rare that that exists. Tracy mentioned how few public school systems across the country teach local history. So the fact that we have lessons on this period of our local history is a real testament to you and your leadership in county. So just deeply appreciative of the work that you do.
I'll be remiss if I don't also say that our Director of Public Libraries, Darcel Graham, if you go to any of our public libraries throughout our system, I'm sure you'll find, again, a lot of listings there. Particularly this month, she will be featuring a number of books throughout every branch that looks at the issue and the challenges of Black America, and very particularly looking at Black History Month. So I know she will want me to share that with you. Again, our public libraries are indeed another real treasure here in Montgomery County. Darcel Graham is our director of our public libraries, and her team, I'm sure, will be glad to greet you. Andrew, I think you have another question.
Yes, this question is asking, it's great to hear from you all. Are any of the panelists interested in telling the Black history of Montgomery County or any other untold Black history stories through short film?
Fantastic. So make sure we hear that correctly. This is a resource, or you're asking a question? Help me understand better.
They're asking a question if any one of the panelists is willing to tell the story of Black history in Montgomery County or through short film.
I'll at least share a resource. So apologies for self-promotion here, but I directed and co-produced a documentary called Finding Fellowship. It's available on any PBS asset. It tells the story of descendant community of Quince Orchard. Its history, our family's descendancy from slavery, and I mentioned the decision in 1968 for how that community decided to survive. So please, that documentary is called Finding Fellowship, and another resource that will be available in MCPS library soon is a book that I wrote called Too Precious to Lose.
One other documentary, we can't put together one on the entire Black history of Montgomery County, but through the Josiah Henson Museum. And if you go online, Redeeming Uncle Tom is the story of Josiah Henson that is now being streamed through PBS, but that features the story of Reverend Henson. Now that was produced by an Ontario production team in conjunction with the Josiah Henson Museum of African Canadian History in Dresden, and with the museum here in Montgomery County, and that's available online, I believe, on PBS still.
And there are a couple more. I'm thinking of Linsville, My Linsville, that you can, My Linsville. You can access that on YouTube, and YouTube, I access through YouTube. But you also can access through YouTube. They called him Mr. Lee, which is about a Tacoma Park resident who he was actually a building services worker at Blair High School, and he was very instrumental in trying to create racial equity in Tacoma Park. But additionally, this year, Montgomery County Public Schools is putting together 4 little mini short documentaries about the history of Montgomery County, and each week there's a video that's released. So you can find the videos on our YouTube channel, MCPS-MD. That's where you'll be able to see the first video, and then each week another video drops. And actually, Reverend Green, who is Jason Green's father, is featured, I believe, in maybe a couple of segments. So please check them out.
Let me also say, too, I think that one of the things that the person asking the question was looking for, too, was maybe a person to collaborate. I think it sounded like that they had an idea. That's what it sounded like to me, that they had an idea and was looking for someone who may have an interest in working with them on creating a new work. And I'm sure that the information you all gave was very important, but I think that's what the question was, as I recall.
Yeah, I can't necessarily, I don't know what that time commitment is, so I'm not promising anything. But what I can do is help connect you with some people. And my name is Tracy Oliver Gary. You can just search for my name on MCPS's website, and I can help put you in contact with people that potentially may be able to help you. But I cannot at this moment promise to help, to do a documentary. Yes, if I can help make that.
Pal, I need you to stay where you are right now real quickly, because our president has walked into the room of county council. I know she has a pressing engagement right after this, so she rushed down to be over here to say hello to us. So I want to give her that opportunity again. She is the president of Montgomery County Council, Miss Natalie Fanny Gonzalez.
Thank you, everybody. It's an honor to be here today. Honestly, I wish I could stay longer, but I have so much happening. And I gotta make it to Germantown with him. He's walking away, but I'm gonna be following him. Celebrating Black History Month and uplifting or the people who work and make this county awesome. It's something that I feel so proud of. And it's something that now or today more than ever we need to continue, celebrate, embrace, and love, and be so proud of. Thank you to each of you for being here and for all the love that you give to this county, the people who live here and make this community awesome. I am so sorry I cannot stay, but I promise you, 30 seconds, I literally run. And I had to run back. And with that, please continue.
Thank you. Really, really appreciate that extra effort. Really, really appreciate this. Very much indeed. All right. We're going to kind of wrap things up a little bit. I wish we could talk more about this topic because you're all just such great panelists. But we have some additional things to do with this program. But I want you to stay where you are. I want you to give me rapid fire now. I want you to give me then at least a closing statement that you want to leave to this community about what you think is important about Black History Month and why we must continue to celebrate 100 years later. We're going to scramble a little bit. We'll mix it up a little bit. We'll go Ms. Tracy.
So really quickly, I think that we always need to dig deeper. With thinking about African-American history, you see the surface, continue to dig deeper and deeper and deeper to learn about why things exist the way that they do, why people behave in the ways that they do, why certain structures exist. So please continue to dig deeper to better understand the very complex histories that we all are kind of situated in and that make us who we are.
Can I jump? Okay, I'm just going to jump in and say that start local. You have local resources available to you. Many of them are public. All of the county museums are public museums, and start local, because oftentimes you're going to find that Black history is local history, and it's right next door, and it's in your neighborhood, and it is accessible to you. You have the Sandy Springs Slave Museum, you have the education programs that are here. Start local and visit your Black museums. Black history is 365 every year, 366 on those leap years. You get an extra year. But it is every single day Black history is made, it is celebrated simply by you coming in, entering a Black history museum, go to the section on Black history, Indigenous history, Latino history, immigrant history. Look at it, dig deeper, go visit.
To repeat an old saying, Black history is American history. It is not just a separate entity as we have kind of placed it. It's an American history. When you do genealogy, one of the things that comes up in Black genealogy is we can't tell our history without going through white history. Without white people, we have no history that we can find by names, by dates, and things like that. So it is our history all in one. And with the people we have running our country right now, wouldn't it be great to do a DNA test on every single individual in Congress? I think that would change a lot of attitudes of many of those people. Just point of concern.
I would say that we need to remember that we are Black history. So much of Black history is taught through icons, the iconography of Black history, the individuals, the individual places, but you realize that extraordinary things have been done by ordinary people. It's just the everyday folk who have resisted and persisted and showed up and borne witness that is Black history. And so when we realize that we are the descendants of that history, that's powerful. And then we have to realize that we are then the ancestors to pass that history on. And so when we realize that we are the next generation of Black history, to empower it and to move it forward.
Thank you very much to our panel, but I was remiss in not giving the audience a chance here to give a question. I think we have one question, and we'll let that be asked, and they'll be there. Please.
Would that help? Thank you again for all of you being here today. And I think I'm an echo what Dr. Smith was saying about Black history being American history. Growing up, my parents and uncles and great uncles, some of you may know, Dr. Wyatt T. Walker, Chief of Staff for Dr. King, Dr. Robert Walker here in DC created the Walker's House, very instrumental in history and Black history. And when I think of history, not only is it teaching us and reminding us and developing us to who we are and to where we're going, but I think it's also a step or a prong on the ladder that says, now what? And that was one of the things that Uncle T, Dr. Wyatt would say, now what? You know, we've learned this and we're into this, now what? How do we progress this to an action or after action plan, now that we learned it, that says that, you know, we are here and there are some strides that we still have to make. So my question is, now what?
Anybody, please.
So one of the things that we do in November for Remembrance and Reconciliation Month, I was thinking, okay, so what is the now what? We have learned this history, now what? So annually, we have a Changemaker workshop for our students that's virtual, where we have local advocates and community members to talk to students about the work that they're doing to either preserve history or it could be any other advocacy organization that teaches the students the strategies for how to make change. And so that is one of the big, to me, things to do is, what are you going to do? You're now held responsible for having this knowledge. What are you going to do to take it forth? The other thing that I want to just say that is, this has not happened yet, but there's a possibility based on what the board votes on. But Montgomery County Public Schools has planned that if this goes through, there will be 6 different regions in the county, dividing the county into 6 regions for regional programs, so that a school that only has one program in the county will not be the only school to have that program. So think of magnet programs. Well, Whitman has a Leadership for Social Justice program. And if this goes through, then that Leadership for Social Justice program will then be spread to some other schools. And part of that program, the way that it's designed, is to teach students to take informed action in their communities. And every student has to have an informed action plan that they do for 4 years. And part of the plan for that is to teach them community organization, leadership skills, and to how to expand your project beyond yourself, how to get others to take the reins as well. So to me, the so what is empowering students with the skills to then say, I'm owning this and I'm going to make a difference in my community.
Good time for you. Just one more response. One more response. Who's going to do that?
Simply stated, sit down with your grandchildren. Because when we think back to our grandparents, there were a lot of things they didn't tell and wouldn't share for whatever reason, you know. But sit down with your grandchildren and make sure they understand the stories of who we are, what we have accomplished, and how we help build this country. Because no matter what is happening in the government, we're not going anywhere. Our history is not going to disappear. If you think of people who came across on the transatlantic slave trade, there's something called cultural baggage. You can't get rid of cultural baggage. You can modify it, but you can't rid it. So we're not going anywhere. We will continue to move forward, and we need to continue to teach our grandchildren and our children. They will get the message just like AMCO. You will pay me now or pay me later. That's how they will get the message.
Very good. Ladies and gentlemen, let's thank our panel. Round of applause for those who are here. Thank you so much. We're going to transition and now have a selection by one of our colleagues, one of our coworkers, PJ Gregory, who would normally be here, but he is actually in class today. But he did want to make sure he was included. So I'll ask then our producer to go ahead and play this, and then we'll excuse our panel and then get ready for our awards presentation. Take it away, producer. Thank you so much. That's P.J. Gregory, member of our Montgomery County Police Department. I want to thank him again. He does great work for our department, but also works with our young people in the cadet program at the police department. So does an outstanding job working with our young people. We have the opportunity every year to also recognize employees, our colleagues, who are doing just great things. They're ordinary people in the capacities for which they serve, but they're doing extraordinary things. And so we want to always bring them to the forefront and recognize them as, again, nominated by their various directors throughout county government. And I'm having my colleague come up, Lanthisa Colvin, who will come up and explain about the awards to be presented at a later date for those who are recipients. Lanthisa Colvin.
Good afternoon, everyone. Once again, I would like to thank everyone for attending the Montgomery County's Employee 2026 Black History Program. I just wanted to take a few minutes to share some highlights about this year's award winners. Tamara Maldonado, sorry if I'm mispronouncing your last name, is incredibly deserving of an award that recognizes ordinary people doing extraordinary things. She is the personification of ordinary in many aspects. She grew up within Montgomery County and chose to keep her roots within the county where she currently lives and works, and has raised her 4 children. She's dedicated 30 years of service to Montgomery County. She's risen through the positions in the Emergency Communications Center of the Montgomery County Police Department. Over her career, she served as a call taker, a dispatcher, a supervisor, and a manager, and now holds the current position as the Deputy Director of Operations. She oversees 84 communication specialists, 20 supervisors, and 4 managers. She oversees operations for emergency services impacting Montgomery County's nearly 1.1 million population, with a call volume of over 800,000 calls a year. She ensures that calls are handled quickly and professionally. In December 2024, she was asked to take on the role of acting director of the ECC while a new director was found. Without hesitation, she took on this position, and she did not complain about the extra duties and responsibilities. And this is one of the many reasons that we are recognizing her as an extraordinary person doing extraordinary things. Ron Martin, he's a recreation specialist at the Betty Curl Thompson Scotland Neighborhood Recreation Center. He exemplifies this year's theme of ordinary people doing extraordinary things through his unwavering dedication to preserving, celebrating, and elevating the rich African-American heritage of the Scotland community and surrounding historically Black neighborhoods. He's transformed the Scotland Neighborhood Recreation Center into a vital hub for cultural preservation and community empowerment. His work goes far beyond typical recreation programming. He doesn't simply just work for the community, he works with them, recognizing that community members themselves are experts in their own history and experiences. Ron centers on young people in the celebration. Youth and teens from the community deliver presentations featuring poetry, storytelling, and discussion of books by Black authors. He serves as an active member of the planning committee for the annual Scotland Juneteenth Heritage Festival. Through this role, he collaborates with community leaders and organizational partners to bring this significant celebration to life. And this is one of the many reasons we're recognizing him for his impact on Montgomery County as an extraordinary, ordinary person. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lanthisa, who's a member of our planning committee, for your presentation. And to those persons who have been, again, named ordinary folks just doing extraordinary things, we congratulate you. I do want to recognize or acknowledge that our good friend and colleague, Gabe Albanos, who's the director of the agency at Recreation, was here and had to move on, but the representatives here as well to, in fact, show support for Ron Martin. who I understand, by the way of the nomination, has been read, just did an outstanding work in the Scotland community. So again, thank again, Director, in his absence. Is he still? There's also, Ron Martin has a Black History Month event that'll be occurring over in the Scotland Committee on the 28th of February. So you all be in tune for that. Okay, we are almost ready to close here. Let me again just take time out to thank all those persons who've been involved in planning this event. Was this a positive event today? Just give me some feedback. To our planning committee, always ably, he doesn't like to say chair, so I'm just going to say facilitated by, again, Brother Anthony Skinner. Thank you so much, Anthony, your leadership in all of this. We could not do this without Teddy Ramlet doing all the stuff behind the scenes. And where's Sel? Sel back in the back there, his team of folks, and MCM for your support as well, and all you all do. And Andrew Akindola, thank you so much for what you do, my brother. Appreciate you helping us out from a TAB's perspective and ensuring that we have connectivity. And all of those who served on the planning committee, thank you all very, very much indeed for this. To our presenters and our panelists, thank you immensely for your efforts and time and energy today. For those who performed, those of the Honor Guard, again, thank you as always for what you do with our Department of Correction Rehabilitation, and also to I think Willie's gone anyway, who did a marvelous job, I should say, doing the national anthem, and also to Consuelo Watts, who is our student at Howard University. So I think I've got everybody, and of course, we again thank those who have come today to be in the audience. Appreciate your being here as well. And then Frederick Hawkins, thank you for leading us off. And the Sergeant General, how do you want to say that? How do you want to say that? Sergeant? Elisa Valentine is who I'm talking about. Our Sergeant. Our Sergeant at Arms. Elisa Valentine, another member of our staff, and she really kept us going. Elisa, thank you for that. All right. We're at a point now we really want to close this out, and we do so with just a thought, hopefully that you'll take with you. It has been extremely cold here recently, and it made me think about my grandmother. She was a quilter. Anybody know what a quilt is? She was a quilter. And she would, all year long, collect little pieces of fabric. She also sewed, so she would have things left over. And everybody knew that she sewed, and so they'd also bring her, again, pieces of fabric. And she would take time out to prepare that quilt. And she would take each piece and lay it in such a way that every single piece had a place on that quilt, Doc. She would have some time to turn it maybe a little bit this way, a little bit that way, because they were triangles, they were squares, they were rectangles, they were even some circles. But she found a way somehow or another, when all that was said and done, to find a place for everybody, to find a place for every single piece of material. And because she had to shift this way or that way with an individual piece, the warmth of that blanket did not change. The warmth of that quilt did not change. It was still as warm as it would have been had she not had to move anything out of the way. It still served the purpose of keeping us warm. And so I thought about Black history. Those of us who are Black in America, I'm not asking to move anybody's peace out of the way. We don't need you to move your peace. We just need to understand that we have a place for our peace. And when we lay it in place, not only do we have the most beautiful mosaic, we've got something that really is not only usable, but serves the purpose even more so. Because not only is it beautiful, it allows all of us to feel the warmth of that quilt on cold nights here in Montgomery County. Black history. is all of our histories. And when we embrace it, it does not diminish everybody else's history. Because all is important. So to all of you, again, have a great, great Black History Month, and thank you for coming, and hopefully we'll see you again next year. Thank you all very, very much.